All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Design Thinking, our one of our series of 2.5 hour classes. And today we are going to be throwing the class to one of our experts, Caleb, who's going to be teaching us a part of design thinking. My name is Nicholas Kramer, and I am the stream lead for the Agile division at WebAge Solutions, and we are excited to be adding design thinking to our repertoire. So during this class, it's going to be 2.5 hours. Caleb is going to be covering some high-level conversations about design thinking, which I'll let him talk to you about. But if you should have some questions or comments during this session, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A panel or drop them in the chat. Either one will work fine. And then we will be moderating those conversations. If you would like to ask a question directly of Caleb that you don't think you want to put in the Q&A, you'd like to speak directly to him, just raise your hand in the attendees box. And when we get you an appropriate spot, I will turn on the conversation so that you can talk and ask him a direct question. Two more pieces of housekeeping items. Number one, you'll see that we just posted a link to Caleb's slides in the chat window, and also an evaluation form. If you would like to fill that out, that would be great. Please go and do both of those things. And we're going to try something a little different on this webinar because this is such a new topic and the interest has been so high. We are going to be capturing some of the most frequently asked questions or the most interesting questions, and we will be creating a Q&A session in our blog on WebAge blog, and you can go out there then and check out the answer. So if you missed getting the answer or you'd like to refer to the answer, you're welcome to go to the website in the next week or so, and we'll have those answers out there. I've already got one question before I throw it to Caleb, and it's about where the presentation slides. If you look in the chat window and you slide up a little bit, you'll see a link there to both the slides and the evaluation form. All right, without further ado, Caleb, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, and welcome to everyone for this 2.5 hour design thinking webinar. So we'll just jump right in here. A little bit about the agenda for this session is to talk a little bit about why design thinking matters, who's using it, what areas of business it can apply to, and then we'll jump into some of the basics around how you think about design thinking, kind of the framework that you use. We'll dive a little bit into some of the first day content of the actual class, the 2-day class that we run around this, specifically around running empathetic interviews. And then we'll wrap up after that and answer any questions you have. Real quick, wanted to talk about some design thinking classes that are coming up. So February 5th and 6th, we'll be offering it in Toronto. And then we'll be doing a virtual one, February 25th and 26th. And then we're also doing a real Agile in Toronto on February. I think I have the dates wrong there. I'll double check those and correct those at the end. But we're offering each of those classes at $9.99 per person, which is 25% off our normal price. And then we also have custom options available. So you can just get in touch with us if you need some more information on any of those or to register, and I'll have some contact information at the end here. All right, so who am I? Figured this would be a good way to start if you're going to listen to me talk for a couple of hours. So my name is Caleb Olfers, entrepreneur, CEO, marketer. I've started a handful of companies and worked in and with leadership roles across a wide array of corporations, startups, and non-profits. And I've utilized design thinking framework to create customer-based solutions within those industries, including software, events, physical goods, and more. So there's a little bit about me. A couple of specific examples I wanted to bring up about design thinking. One company that I helped start, we actually spent about 6 months and $100,000 developing a product that when we launched, it ultimately just didn't meet our customers' needs. This was a pretty tough lesson for us to learn. And so we basically went back to the drawing board. We implemented some of the design thinking process, specifically around empathizing with our customers, and then we rebuilt the service. We did that based on what they were actually looking for, what would actually solve problems they have. And at that point, things clicked. It was a very different scenario than the first time we launched this product. And so within the first month, it was a fairly expensive product for consumers, and we had 20 customers and 3 enterprise contracts worth several $1 million. And so at that point, we were like, okay, we've got something here. And we definitely credited that to the design thinking process. Another example was a startup I was running, was doing entrepreneurial focused events right here in Omaha, Nebraska. And it doesn't sound particularly special at first, but once you attend the event, you kind of start to understand how we use design thinking and empathetic learning to create a better experience. So even though it was a little bit of a smaller event, you know, anywhere between 600 and 800 people here in Omaha, Nebraska, we were able to bring in founders of incredible companies like AOL, Twitter, Zappos, Reddit, and a lot of others over the course of several years. And one of the things that we found out through empathetic learning with our attendees was being able to spend time with these incredible founders and people. And so we asked them to stay the entire time of the conference, attending the after parties and going to lunches and whatnot, so they could connect with our attendees, which if you've been to a conference before, isn't the normal. Usually you don't have that type of access to speakers, and usually you don't get that chance to connect with them in that way. And so rather than just showing up on stage, giving a talk, and then flying right back out, we were able to get these people, these founders, to stick around and have that connection. And so the attendees often talked about how amazing it was to get that access. And then conversely, the founders also talked about how amazing Omaha was because they were actually able to spend some time here. We were able to show them around, have them interact with the people of our city. And because of that, we were able to get coverage from a bunch of publications, ended up on top 10 conferences to attend lists on websites like Forbes and Inc. and Fast Company. And we gained a lot of attention because of it. Out of all of the conferences around entrepreneurs and startups and innovation, here's this kind of little humble event in Omaha, Nebraska, getting a lot of recognition because we were ultimately connecting with our attendees in the way that they wanted. So all that being said, I'm still learning every day. I'm not the world's foremost expert on design thinking. And there's some of you on this call that might even be a little bit beyond me or know things that I'm unaware of, or probably know stories of successful design thinking that I haven't heard, but feel free to share those. And I just want to invite you to come along on this learning journey with me. So why design thinking? In short, design thinking leads you to innovative new solutions that start with quick, low fidelity experiments that provide learning and gradually increase in fidelity. And in turn, this helps save money, helps you move faster, and create better things. So this is the outcome of design thinking when you have buy-in, support, understanding, and you follow the process. This is the dream of design thinking, but it takes specific steps to get to the dream. So what design thinking isn't? I wanted to address this real quick for anyone who's just kind of exploring design thinking and maybe not sure exactly what it is. So what it isn't is website design. It's not just designing a website. It's not just for designers or creatives. This is for your entire team. This is for anyone who's involved in a company. And we'll get into later all the specific areas that design thinking can apply in. And that'll make more sense for who can be involved and who can utilize the design thinking process. It's not just user interface or user experience. It's also not just a quick fix. Design thinking is not a band-aid you can just apply on something to increase revenue or make your customers happier. It is a process. It is something where you have to have buy-in from teams and leadership, and it can output really positive, good things for your company. And then also, it's not just for products. Again, like I said, we'll get into this in a little bit, how it affects leadership or company direction and a handful of other areas. A couple of quick buy-in facts on what the industry looks like. 10% of Fortune 500s say that design is their #1 priority right now. 75% of organizations are engaged in design thinking, and these are all self-reported facts. So 71% of design thinking organizations say it has improved their culture. 71% say they're creating 10 times the number of assets than before. 69% perceive the innovation process to be more efficient. And 78% have defined a process for creating new digital customer experience ideas. Hopefully some of those stats trigger some things for you in the company that you work at and where you'd like to see some improvement and the exploration around how design thinking could potentially help you do those things. So, who uses design thinking? There's a lot of design-driven companies such as Apple and Coca-Cola, IBM, Nike, Procter & Gamble. There's a specific list right there among a lot of others. These specific companies, though, make up the Design Value Index. The Design Value Index is a portfolio of 16 publicly traded companies that integrate design thinking into corporate strategy. It has outperformed the S&P 500 over the past 10 years by 219%. And these companies attribute that success to design thinking implemented throughout their companies. Everything coming out of these companies is design driven, and several of them are backing the design effort by things like hiring chief design officers, creating high-level executive leadership positions, by hiring design teams. One company hired over 500 designers in the last several years, and even building creative offices around the world, specifically to house those design teams to make sure that design and design thinking gets implemented throughout the organization. They're taking it very seriously. So, what are some of the things that they're actually creating? What is bringing this extra value? SAP has won over 27 design awards, including 7 Red Dot awards since integrating design thinking. If you're not familiar with Red Dot, it's basically the most prestigious design award in the world. So this is pretty huge that they've been winning all of these awards and that they attribute that to design thinking. Intuit developed an app called SnapTax. It was a mobile app, and it allowed users to complete their taxes in 10 minutes or less. After 3 weeks of launching, they had 350,000 downloads, which is pretty huge. Disney's park experience design is also credited to design thinking. If you haven't been to Disney, I have as an adult without children. And it was just an incredible, seamless experience, from buying the tickets to showing up to talking to someone in a food line or a exhibit line. Just everything that you touch at Disney makes up this truly magical experience. They have really thought through every single little thing to create something that is really magical. Starwood developed Aloft Hotels after doing empathetic interviews and learning what the market was really looking for, and they grew that hotel chain to over 75 locations within 4 years, which, if you know much about hotels or hospitality, that is pretty massive and successful growth. They really tapped into a clear consumer need. Procter & Gamble recently developed a process to develop plastics that are thinner, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly than the industry standard. And they're estimating that new technology around plastics will save them up to $1 billion a year. If you've been to a fast food restaurant recently where you've seen the Coca-Cola fountain machine, I think they're called Free Flow, but it's essentially got a touch screen where you can create all sorts of drinks from Coca-Cola, all in all over 165 options. But they credit design thinking to coming up with that idea and ultimately implementing it. And then EcoWorld, if you're not familiar, they're a multi-billion-dollar property development company, specifically more in Asia. And they have helped employees break down working in silos and become more collaborative by putting several of their employees through a design thinking course. So, famous quote, of course, perfect time for this, Steve Jobs, design is not just what it looks and feels like, design is how it actually works. So I want to get in a little bit to where design thinking can apply. So one thing about it is the thought that if you apply design thinking to your business, that you'll acquire more customers, you'll increase revenue, your company will be more innovative, everything is going to work better, and everyone will be super happy. First of all, this is a potential, it's not a guarantee. So you need to change mindsets for things to ultimately change. And for that to happen, you need a strong why. So if you don't have a why, you won't be able to tell a compelling story on why change should even happen and why employees at your company should adopt design thinking. So maybe utilizing design thinking starts with coming up with a compelling why for your company and then telling that story to encourage design thinking training throughout your organization. Second of all, we need to separate areas of impact and then treat them individually within the design thinking process. So depending on product design or customer acquisition or business design, you go about it in just a little bit different way, thinking about it in different ways. So with product design, there's a big potential to increase revenue for the business through existing customer segments and new products and services for them. In essence, what we want to do is create new value for our existing customers so they can buy more and thus generate more revenue for the company. Let's say our business is a restaurant. Our main customer is a family with young children. So we do some research and we find out why they really come to our restaurant is for the peaceful atmosphere. However, when they're here with their kids get frustrated and bored. If you have kids, I feel like you can probably empathize with this. So how can we go about solving this? Well, what if we came up with a new playground for the kids? Or what if we had additional personnel that will take care of them while their parents are eating? What if we had specific places for kids to eat that's right next to the playground so they're not running around the restaurant between their meal and the playground? What if we created a junior master chef program that will allow the kids to experience what it's like to be a chef and maybe even cook some food for their parents? So none of these ideas are about new dishes or servers looking nicer. It's about adding value and enriching the experience of our existing customers through understanding what they actually care about. And now there's a potential to increase the number of customers because we're solving these core problems. So they're going to experience something that they were looking for, and then they're going to, word of mouth, tell all of their friends who are also looking for something similar, and then you'll be able to market around those things as well. Excuse me. So what about new customer segments with our existing products and services? So we want to make sure that our existing officer is viable and interesting to a new customer segment that we're trying to attract. That means that our existing products and services need to be improved or adapted to this new group of people. If we stick with the restaurant idea, let's imagine that we want to attract a younger customer base. Excuse me, just trying to cough off a microphone here. So if we want to attract a younger customer base, we currently have a lot of families with children coming to our place, and we'd like to open up the doors to a new customer segment. So again, we start with research, and we find out what this new customer segment really values is things like hanging with friends, always being online, and they also care about honesty and transparency of whatever service they're using. So what if we took our current building, chose a time during the day, either after school or maybe at some point in the evening, and we turned it into a space for them to relax and hang out, even without paying? What if we added a new way for them to pay for their meals, including discounts and simple ways to divide the bill between them and their friends? What if we came up with something like giving them the opportunity to use the restaurant's audio system and put any music on from their Spotify, have full control of the projector displaying their favorite YouTube, and we could use Instagram for voting up or down based on what they played. Obviously, there's a handful of logistics to solve if that was to be implemented. But in essence, let's change the products and services we already have to suit the needs of that particular customer group. So you can be innovative by coming up with a new product that solves people's problems, or you can be innovative by just changing how your current products reach customers. So this can span the entire company, a division of your company, or just focus on one product or service. So what if we change the meaning of a restaurant? What if we weren't trying to be bigger or better or faster or more efficient? What if we were just different? Let's say the restaurant doesn't have a menu. This would mean that everyone coming in would have to imagine what they'd like to eat using only a list of ingredients from the server. And then it would be the chef's challenge to come up with a dish that uses those chosen ingredients. Or what if we removed the chef entirely? Maybe people coming in could use cooking stations and cook for each other. Now it's not just a restaurant, it's a place where people can come cook if they don't have a great kitchen set up themselves. Or it's a creative hub for cooking classes. Coughing off a microphone here. So becoming a creative hub for cooking classes. So now we have more customers and revenue. We need to make sure that the company remains profitable. So we need to look at what drives the cost of our services and products up, and what we could do to simplify the processes and company structures surrounding those to make them easier to handle without a negative impact on the customer experience. This often ends up creating simplified services that deliver more value to the customer. So let's try and simplify that process in a restaurant to make it more profitable. Typically, this means working closely with employees and empowering them with the right tools for the job. So we could automate processes and transfer things to customers themselves. This idea is already pretty common with things like all-you-can-eat service buffets, food halls where customers are taking their trays to a specific drop-off point and clearing them off themselves, customers ordering meals using mobile apps or screens that allow for ordering and paying right when the customer walks in. So one area that's often neglected is companies' employees, the people responsible for making sure that everything works as it should. In order to have happy customers, we need to have happy employees. So if you've been to a restaurant that always has the nicest people working as servers, someone in that restaurant understands the need for collaboration and unity between the front and back of house staff. Some of them are customer facing, some of them are not. Either way, they're building on each other's strengths and they're delivering value for each other in this nice system. So the solutions here would solve issues for those teams of people. Ordering systems so that the kitchen knows when to cook or what to cook and what is planned. Shift structure and table management so servers are not overwhelmed. Team-based serving so customers are always being taken care of. Collaborative support so no one gets thrown under the bus. And a clear escalation protocol. Oh, excuse me. And a clear escalation protocol that empowered employees can use to handle issues themselves or move them up to leadership. So factors that can affect that seamless unity and collaboration: proper training, leaders over bosses, casual team building outside work that could include even closing the restaurant for a few days to make that happen. And there's a lot of other opportunities that you could create to better the work environment for the people you employ. Training your leadership to take the lead and develop their direct reports in specific ways is an important factor in promoting design thinking or change throughout your organization. If your leadership is not bought in or doesn't allow your employees to work with some level of autonomy, they won't be able to implement design thinking practices and make best choices for the customers. So our course will go into detail on developing leadership buy-in and keeping key leaders informed on progress. So that way innovative solutions don't stall out or get shut down after a team puts in the work and comes up with an innovative new idea. Side plug here, we also have courses on servant leadership specifically. So there needs to be open communication between leadership and teams throughout the entire design thinking process. Ideally, you have a senior leader who is championing the design thinking process for a new solution that's related to a business objective, and then they're empowering a team to work autonomously to come up with incredible solutions. And then finally, in this growing market, we shouldn't forget about the impact we're having on our local and global communities or the environment. It's a key aspect of decision-making by customers, and they choose our product because we're doing more than others to protect things that they care about. And this area is more current now than ever. Consumers care a lot about what they eat, and this can mean that we'll need to be intentional about all the elements of our business model, all the way down to the ingredients we use, and utilizing things like fair trade, organic, and locally sourced. So all of these factors matter if this is the area that you're trying to build your competitive advantage on. So obviously that changes if you're focusing on a different competitive advantage and your customers care more about that specific advantage. The design thinking process needs to adapt depending on which area of the business we're trying to affect. The area we choose dramatically affects what kind of products and services we will be designing. And each approach will still need an appropriate amount of research to put every solution through its paces and make sure it's designed in the right context. Do we want the company to generate more growth, or do we want it to be friendlier to the environment? This is why you need to find your why. The answer to the question matters greatly when designing new services or improving existing ones. So, if you take our full course, the 2-day program, what do you get out of it? You'll be able to understand the design thinking process. You'll be able to identify and assess opportunities through customer needs analysis. You'll be able to create clear product specification based on customer needs that are desirable, feasible, and viable. You'll be able to generate and evaluate new product and service concepts through applied creativity. You'll be able to work more collaboratively and get more leadership buy-in. Just a quick note, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in Q&A or the chat. You might need to click raise your hand, and then as they come in, we will answer them when we take some breaks here. All right, so design thinking in roughly 5 minutes. The end goal of design thinking is creating a solution that's desirable, feasible, and viable. So desirability means, is this product or service addressing a real customer need? Feasibility means, can we develop a solution that is technically feasible and better than competitors? Viability means, is there a viable business model around this product or service? So the goal of design thinking is the center point there, the mix of all three of those. It can't just be good for your customers. It can't just be really good technology, and it can't just be a good business solution. They have to come together, and that's what makes up design thinking. The bulk of design thinking focuses on the connection with humans and evoking emotional stories to empathize with their true needs. In short, design thinking is an approach that allows you to create meaningful products and services for your existing customers, as well as new customer segments. And you can do this by gathering insights and taking a quick iterative approach to design and delivery by putting the people that you're designing for at the forefront of the design. It takes that end customer and it validates the value so that we can synthesize and quantify that value in order to create new tangible experiences and innovations. We can also dig deep into the business side and define the business goals. So design thinking is built around the following principles. The first one is people. The one element that, regardless if we're looking at the business or the end customers, is that there are people on both sides. People have aspirations, motivations, emotions, experiences, and context. So we need to find out as much as we can from them. Learning from people and being open to what they have to say without judgment and presumptions is key. Another principle is perspectives. So bringing together diverse views on a subject we're working on is very useful. It allows the flow of fresh design blood into the system, and it puts us outside of the box at the right times in the process. Inviting customer representatives from many different departments or divisions in the company, as well as external experts from various parts of the market, can play a huge role. Another principle is creative focus. The design thinking approach makes sure that we're able to let the creative juices flow, but also make sure that we maintain focus. So every time we generate multiple choices, we identify appropriate acts of prioritization and focus back on the right things so we can keep the design rocket ship pointed in the right direction. Another element is iterations. The design thinking process allows for jumping between all of the phases of design thinking. So whether you feel like the conclusions you have from the previous design step, or whenever you feel like the conclusions you have from the previous design step aren't comprehensive enough, you can just go back and do some more exploration. Another element is delivery. Each stage of the process needs to deliver value. Design artifacts like prototypes, minimum viable products, insight, research, and synthesis. Call it whatever you want, each step should produce something. So, design thinking is human-centered design. It's radical collaboration with diverse teams. It's a bias towards making over just talking. The anchoring point in design thinking is empathy. You start by figuring out a solution for the problem that you're facing by talking to the people who have the problem and seeking to understand it, rather than just building something that will, quote unquote, solve the problem. This ends up becoming a band-aid that isn't really a true solution, so it won't be fully adopted by your customer base. After you empathize, you'll go on to define the actual problem. You'll come up with your specific point of view, and then you'll ideate around that. You'll prototype those ideas, and then you'll go back and test the prototypes. So you may see some similarities between design thinking and lean startup and/or the agile process. And the overlap is what helps them all fit together to create the best solutions, products, and the right way to go about building and maintaining them. Design thinking is a non-linear process. You go through the 5 levels of design thinking over and over again throughout the process. And once you've gone through those stages and feel good about potential solutions, then you look at business viability and technology feasibility. So as you start to understand through empathetic interviews and observing your users and then defining the problem, sometimes you have to come back through as you're defining the problem because you don't quite have clarity or you're not quite getting it. And so then you go back and you observe again, or you ask more questions based on some of the definitions that you've come up with. And then that same thing happens as you start ideating. Sometimes you come up with some ideas and you need to clarify them, so you go back to your define stage. And then that continues all the way through prototyping and testing. You're really involving the users in every single stage. Oftentimes, design can feel like this. It doesn't always feel good when you're in it, but these are the key elements you need for breakthrough ideas. That tough feeling has been scientifically proven to be the barrier that you need to break through to generate new ideas. When things get tough and you want to give up or you want to put a simple solution on it, that's when your brain actually starts to go into overdrive to figure out the problem. So as you're going through the understanding, observing, ideating, and then the prototyping phase, you'll have to go back through all of them over and over to understand and create better solutions. You have to adopt a testing mindset and not get stuck or set on a solution until you've fully vetted it out. We have a question that came in about human-centered design and if it makes sense to create personas at this stage. Absolutely, and we talked about that in the full course, going through and creating personas, and similar to the entire design thinking process, those personas might change. And so as you're going through interviews and you're observing your users, you might be able to come up with a persona. And then as you start defining the problems and ideate on them, and as you keep going back through this process, you can refine those personas, but they can definitely help guide you as you're doing the define and ideation segments of design thinking. So design thinking, lean startup, agile, how do they fit together? Design thinking is where the entire process starts. It's similar to how agile improves the development process. Design thinking improves the problem and idea process. It really sets the stage for all of these things to work together smoothly. Design thinking is how we explore and solve problems. Lean is the framework for testing our beliefs and learning our way to the right outcomes. Agile is how we adapt to changing conditions with software. And then continuous adaptation is where we're growing, testing, and reassessing. Design thinking is about ability and learning. The head of teaching at Stanford Design School, Carissa Carter, talks about some of the abilities that make designers great. Abilities like dealing with ambiguity, empathetic learning, synthesis, experimentation, and a lot more. A designer's ability to make a meaning, frame a problem, and explore potential solutions are key. So ask yourself when the last time your first idea was your best idea. Meaning and new ideas emerge when we explore things. Design thinking is simply how we explore those problems and solutions. Everyone designs, whether it's conscious or not. If you're solving a problem, you're designing a solution. Design thinking is just a mindset that helps us do it better. And that's why when we say design thinking is for more than just designers, it's for anyone who's trying to solve a problem. You're designing a solution. Lean started out as a response to a scientific management practice in manufacturing. Organizations were searching for efficiency through process, rules, and procedures, and management was mostly about control. In modern business, control like that is not plausible. Things are too complex, too unpredictable, and too dynamic to be controlled. Lean offers a different mindset for managing any system of work. It's fundamentally about exploring uncertainty, making decisions by experimenting and learning, and empowering people who are closest to the work to decide how best to achieve desired outcomes. Lean says be adaptive, not predictive. Agile is related to Lean. The differences are mostly about what these mindsets are applied to and how. In conditions of high uncertainty, Agile offers ways to build software that's dynamic and can adapt to change. This isn't just about pivoting. It's about scaling and evolving solutions over time. So if we accept that today's solution will be different from tomorrow's, then we should focus on meeting our immediate needs in a way that doesn't constrain our ability to respond when things change later. The heart of Agile is adapting gracefully to changing needs with software. Design thinking is a creative process for developing meaningful solutions for meeting people's needs that are both feasible and viable. It consists of five main focuses. I really like Stanford's School of Design process. There's also a few other thought leaders in this space that have something pretty similar. And so if you're out there Googling around and looking for more information, you might find this specifically or something similar. There's a lot of good frameworks around design thinking, and this course utilizes all of them together based on the learning that we've put together in it. But definitely Stanford design thinking process is one of the best. So the 5 steps are empathize, define, ideate, prototyping, and then testing. So when we empathize, empathy is key to human-centered design. We want to observe users in the context of their lives. We want to engage them by interviewing and asking questions. And we want to immerse ourselves in their lives. We want to wear their shoes, so we want to experience what they experience. So the best solutions come from the best insights into human behavior. You want to discover emotions that drive user behavior. We want to uncover user needs, which they might not even be aware of. This is huge. A lot of people don't even know why they do the things that they do. And so it takes questions and observations to actually get to the root of why they do those things. Oftentimes it's led by an emotion. We also want to identify the right users to design for, and then we want to use all of those insights to design innovative solutions. The way you go about empathizing is through interviews, shadowing, seeking to truly understand your users, walking a mile in their shoes, and then taking a non-judgmental approach. You're here just to observe, not to judge. The second phase is the define or point of view. The define mode is when you unpack those empathy findings into needs and insights, and you scope a meaningful challenge. Based on your understanding of users and their environments, you want to come up with an actionable problem statement. This is your point of view. More than simply defining the problem, your point of view is a unique design vision that is framed by your specific users. The define mode explicitly expresses the problem you strive to address. In order to be truly generative, you have to reframe your challenge based on the new insights gained through your empathy work. This reframed point of view or problem statement can then be used as a solution generating springboard. So a really spectacular point of view preserves emotion and the individual that you're designing for. It includes strong language, and it uses sensical wording. And then it includes a strong insight that will generate a lot of possibilities. So you want to follow this format. User needs to, whatever their need is, because of the insight you gained. So a bad example would be a teenage girl needs more nutritious food because the vitamins are vital to good health. Meh. A better example would be a teenage girl with a bleak outlook needs to feel more socially accepted when eating healthy food because in her neighborhood, a social risk is more dangerous than a health risk. The third phase is Ideate. So Ideate is the mode where you generate radical design alternatives. Ideation is a process of going wide in terms of concepts and outcomes, and it's a mode of flaring instead of focus. The goal of ideation is to explore a wide solution space, both a large quantity and broad diversity of ideas. And from this repository of ideas, you can build prototypes to test with users. So important concepts within the ideation phase are putting customers in the midst of everything and describing their journeys. Telling more stories because they keep ideas alive, and then bringing together heaps of ideas, concocting scenarios, and even weird ones. This is where out-of-the-box thinking is really helpful. And you can get outside of the box in various ways. For instance, what if this idea had to be 10 times bigger or 10 times smaller? Looking up what people who hate your company, your product, or your industry think. What type of thoughts are they having? What are the things that are they saying that could help you get your mind outside of obviously being a believer in wherever you're at? What are the extreme users saying, both on the negative side and on the positive side? Even something as weird as what's the worst idea you could come up with? In true brainstorming fashion, if there's no bad ideas, any idea that you come up with could lead you to a good idea. So even starting with what's the worst idea you could come up with, you could eventually iterate that down into something that ends up being beneficial. So once you have that broad base of ideas, then you can get into prototyping. So prototyping should only command as much time, effort, and investment as are needed to generate useful feedback and evolve an idea. The more finished a prototype seems, the less likely its creators will be to pay attention to and profit from feedback. What does that mean? Be scrappy. Significant innovations don't come from incremental tweaks. Design thinkers pose questions and explore constraints in creative ways that proceed in entirely new directions. Prototyping is often thought of a way to test functionality, but it also serves other purposes. It helps you gain empathy. It deepens your understanding of the users you're designing for and the design space. As you show them your prototypes, you gain further information that maybe they didn't share or were aware of until actually experiencing your prototype. It helps you explore and develop multiple concepts to test in parallel. It helps you test by creating prototypes to test and then refining those solutions. And then it helps inspire you and inspire others by showcasing your vision for a solution. Then we want to get into testing. And testing is your chance to gather feedback, refine solutions, and continue to learn about your users. The test mode is an iterative mode in which you want to place low resolution prototypes in the appropriate context of your user's life. Prototype as if you know you're right, test as if you know you're wrong. This will keep you from creating something, believing it is the perfect solution, and then driving that vision home. You want to create something like it is a true solution, but when you're actually testing it, you want to find out the cracks. You want to find out the holes. You want to find out why it's not truly solving a solution or a problem for a customer in a perfect way. So how do you do that? You want to create authentic experiences for your users to test them so you can learn more about your user, refine the prototypes and solutions, and then test and refine your point of view. Again, design thinking, it's not linear. You want to go back through all of the steps over and over again to uncover more knowledge. So a quick note about radical collaboration. It's a hugely valuable asset for innovation. Many of the techniques in design thinking benefit from collaboration, either working as a constant team throughout, or working as an individual, but bringing in a partner or team at certain stages. So at the same time, working as an individual has advantage. Balance the collaborative power of the team with the nimbleness and practicality of individual work. You want to deploy a multidisciplinary team from day one. Rarely are there more than 10 members on one of these teams. The lean approach saves an immense amount of organizational bandwidth that's typically tied to large teams and taller hierarchies. So once you have your team, you want to extend design thinking throughout all stages of the product. You want to include engineers and marketers in the initial product definition stage. You want to include designers in the engineering process. This creates a shared understanding that contributes to a project's success before, during, and after its launch. The best team is a multidisciplinary one that has experience working as a unit so they can fill the gaps between individuals and ensure agility. If trust within the team needs to be established, you can start with small, low investment projects with little risk attached to failure. You can have someone steeped in design thinking and agile development lead those small scale experiments. And then from there, ideate, create, test, review, and try again. Teams need to move together, but they also need to move quickly. So let's say in a project, engineering hits a roadblock while implementing a core product feature. In a traditional hierarchy, the whole project is put on hold while the strategy team works on an altered direction. But if you have a multidisciplinary team from the start, you can use that diversity of talent on the team. You can use the aligned understanding you have and the iterative approach of the product building process to move quicker and not waste time. The team as a whole can quickly react and rechart the path rather than putting the entire project on hold. A big reason a team in that scenario would be able to pivot so effectively is because they appreciate how important it is to be intentional about how the team is moving. Design thinking puts a focus on prototyping, but once the big idea is on the table, it can be echoed through a small-scale design thinking session. These sessions usually append at the end of a design sprint. We typically adhere to a traditional 2-week sprint within Agile engineering, but the project needs and our team's resources ultimately dictate the cadence. Regardless, at the end of every project sprint, you want to reflect on research, vision, prototyping, and scale. The multidisciplinary team has a small-scale design thinking session, either as part of the retrospective or while designing the next sprint. So now you have a brief understanding of the basics of design thinking. And I want to go a little more in depth on how to interview to show you kind of how the course will run. And it looks like we had a question come in on differentiating between designer versus an architect. And I think that's a little bit more of a longer form answer that we can include in the blog afterwards. So phase one is empathize through in-depth interviewing. I'm sure we've all seen this picture before, but this is the goal with in-depth interviewing. It's to find out what the customer actually wanted. And when you have a collaborative, multidisciplinary team, you end up with a whole team that knows exactly what the customer wants and how to do their part to put it together. If you start with design thinking, you can uncover a true solution and then communicate that through stories to help the entire company collaborate and make something that the customer actually wants. The thing about the slide is that each of these departments have some type of interaction with customers, and that brings some level of insight or understanding to each step of design thinking. And this is why collaboration is so important. So empathy is a key element to human-centered design. Like we talked about earlier, you want to observe, engage, and immerse. So you're observing users in the context of their lives. This helps you find clues to how they think and feel. You want to capture quotes, behaviors, and other notes that reflect their experience. Watching users gives you clues as to what they think and feel, and what they need. This is literal. You want to set up times to have users use your tool in front of you. I've run these experiments and I've asked to be a part of them. And these observations can provide fascinating insights. Even asking a user to do something with your product, observing what they do, and then asking them questions about it, like, why did you do that? Or what do you think about that thing or that feature or the interaction with that? And sometimes even as a user, as I've played that role in these observations, it tells me something about myself that I was unaware of. I'll just start using something or doing something, and then someone will be asking me a question about why I did that. And I'll kind of surprise myself, like, oh, I don't know, I was just kind of doing that. And then if I actually think about it, I'm like, oh, well, really, I think I did it for this reason. And I didn't even realize that was the reason. So then you want to engage your users. You want to actually interview them. You want to ask questions. You want to ask why 5 different times. And you want to get to the root of the issue. You want to watch out for internal filters when you're doing the interview. You want to rephrase to make sure that you're comprehending. So as they're saying something and you're writing down notes, you want to repeat it back to them. Oftentimes, our brain translates things differently. And so as we rephrase, it helps add clarity. And then you want to engage, as you engage users, you'll reveal deeper insights into their beliefs and values. And then finally, immersing yourself in their experience, wearing their shoes, really getting to understand them. Please don't try this with your customers. If we have any Star Trek fans in here, this is the Vulcan mind meld. It's how they get into other people's brains and understand them. And we can't do that. So design thinking is the way we go about getting information out of people's minds and into our hands. The best solutions come from the best insights into human behavior. And we want to discover the emotions that drive that behavior. We want to uncover user needs that they might not be aware of. And we want to identify the right users to design for and use those insights to design innovative solutions. People do not always do what you think they do. They don't always do what you tell them to do. They don't always do what they think they do. And they don't always do what they say they do. No, that can be confusing. But observation and asking why makes you find out what people really do and need. So you want to assume a beginner's mindset. We carry our own experiences, understanding, and expertise into everything that we do. Your unique perspective is an incredibly valuable asset to bring to any design challenge. At the same time, your viewpoint carries assumptions and personal beliefs. Your preconceived notions could actually be misconceptions or stereotypes, and they can limit the amount of real empathy that you could build. This is why we want to assume a beginner's mindset in order to put aside biases and approach a design challenge with fresh eyes. So, how do you assume a beginner's mindset? Don't judge. You want to observe and engage users without the influence of value judgments on their actions, circumstances, decisions, or whatever their issue is. You want to question everything, even and particularly the things that you think you already understand. Rather than assuming that you know where they're coming from, assuming that you know the answer, you want to continually ask questions to learn about their world from their perspective. And that ties into being truly curious, striving to assume a posture of wonder and curiosity, both in circumstances that seem either familiar or uncomfortable. Just ask the question. And then you want to find patterns. You want to look for interesting threads and themes that emerge across user interactions. And you want to actually listen. Ditch any agendas, let the scene soak into your psyche, absorb what users say to you and how they say it without thinking about how you're going to respond. So what, why, and how is a tool that can help you reach deeper levels of observation. Simple scaffolding to move you from a concrete observation of a particular situation to the more abstract emotions and motives at play behind the scenes. This is particularly powerful when analyzing photos that your team took in the field, both for synthesis purposes and to direct your team to future areas of needs finding. So, how do you set up what, why, and how? Pretty simple. You can just copy this framework on a piece of paper. Draw it out, concrete, the emotional, the what, why, how. And then you can start with concrete observations. So what is the user doing in a situation, whether you're actually watching them or you're just looking at a photograph? You want to notice that, you want to write down objective details, you don't want to make any assumptions, just observing. And so then you move to understanding. So how is the user doing what they're doing? Does it require effort? Do they appear rushed? Does the activity appear to be a negative or a positive experience? You want to use phrases packed with adjectives. And then you want to step out onto a limb of interpretation. So why is the user doing what they're doing in the particular way that they're doing it? You can make some informed guesses regarding motivation and emotions. This step reveals assumptions that you should test with users and often uncovers unexpected insights. So, how do we actually prepare for an interview? Time that you get with your users is precious, so you want to make the most of it. You should allow room for spontaneous user-guided conversations, but you should never abandon your responsibility to also prepare. Especially when following up with users, it's essential to plan your discussions ahead of time. You might not get to every question you prepare, but you should come in with a plan for engagement. And sometimes not getting to every question is a good thing because you ask the first couple and then you kept asking why, or you found a thread to go a little bit deeper on to try to understand something, and the user really opened up. They shared a story, they shared some emotions about that thing, and you were able to kind of go deep on that. And so maybe you only had 20 minutes and you only got through 3 of your 10 questions, but you got a lot of insight in those first 3. I've run interviews that have kind of scaled the gambit on this. Ones where it was really quick, short answers, and I couldn't get them to open up at all, and I got through all questions in a matter of a few minutes, and then it was just over and we moved on. And then I've also run interviews where we've had those really deep, insightful answers, just talking and sharing about some of the early on questions and didn't ultimately have time to get to the end. So how do you prepare? You want to brainstorm questions. You want to write down as many potential questions as your team can generate. And then you want to build on each other's ideas to flesh out meaningful subject areas. You want to identify and order the themes after you have all these questions. You want to put them into areas where, subject areas where most of those questions would fall, and then determine the order of the questions that help the conversation flow fluidly. This decreases the potential for kind of a scattershot interaction with users. Then once you've grouped your questions, you want to find redundancies or questions that seem really strangely out of place, and just cut them out. Also want to make sure that you include a lot of why questions. Sometimes as I'm coming up with my interview prep, I'll just add in every other question, why, just as a reminder that I need to keep asking it. You can also add in things like, tell me about the last time you blank type of questions. And then you also want to ask a lot of questions about how the user feels. So after coming up with all of these questions, I'll input the why, tell me about the last time, tell me about how that made you feel. Basically ends up becoming a little bit of a therapy session. Just kidding. So you want to remember that your open-ended questions allow for stories, and stories lead to insights for design solutions. So we want to interview for empathy. We interview to gain empathy. By interviewing users, you begin to better understand a person's behaviors, choices, and needs. So how do you interview for empathy? You ask why, even when you know the answer. Talked about that earlier. It's hugely important. You want to ask for specifics. You don't want to say usually when asking a question. Instead, you want to ask about a specific occurrence. Like, tell me about the last time that you want to encourage stories. Stories reveal how users think about the world. You want to look for inconsistencies. So what users say and do can be different, kind of like we talked about earlier. Those inconsistencies often hide interesting insights. You want to pay attention to nonverbal cues, being aware of body language and emotions. And you don't want to be afraid of silence. When you allow for silence, you give users time to reflect on their answers, which may lead to even deeper responses. So asking a question, letting them think about it, embracing that awkward quiet. And then as they answer, even giving them a minute after they've done answering. And again, paying attention to nonverbal cues. Are they still thinking about it? And just giving them space to keep thinking about it. I've definitely had this happen during interviews where someone has an answer pretty quick. You can see that in their mind, they're still working on it. You give them just another 20 seconds to think about it. Even if I'm writing down the answer, or I'm just even pretending to write down an answer while they're thinking about it, because I know something more is coming. And then oftentimes a deeper insight will come after that first initial kind of gut response. So you want to ask questions naturally and neutrally, and you don't want to suggest answers. So what do you think about buying gifts for your spouse is better than, don't you think shopping is great? The goals of an interview is to gain a deeper understanding of users' beliefs, values, experiences, behaviors, and motivations. These are transmitted via stories. We want to get users to tell us stories and share their emotions. We want to capture notes full of details and specific quotes and create our own stories about these users. We want to rephrase to make sure that we're not putting our own spin on it. We want to practice listening and digging into comments, saying, tell me more about that. How'd that make you feel? Asking why. We want to assume a beginner's mindset. Even if you know, ask the question. Your first few interviews may be rough, and that's okay. Just keep going. If you haven't run these before, I remember my first few, and even when I come around to a new product, those first couple are always a little bit of a relearning experience for me. And it feels a little weird, and I feel like I'm kind of messing up. But then usually talking with the other interviewers that I'm with, we have discovered some good things that came out of it, even if it was an awkward interview, and you get smoother as you go along. By the time you're on your third, fourth, fifth interview, you've really got it down pat. It's not that hard. You know how to kind of functionally and smoothly run the interview. So preparing, creating an interview guide as a team. This is a framework that will help you stay unbiased. So asking open-ended questions and staying away from binary or yes/no questions. Rather than average, ask, when was the last time, or when was the best time, or the worst time? Specificity usually leads to clarity. Less fact-finding and more story-based. So whether or not the stories people tell are true, they reveal how they think about the world. We want to ask questions that get people telling stories. Like I mentioned, sometimes you're going to get people who don't really want to engage in that way, who are just going to answer your questions quick, say they have nothing more to say about it, and then move on. And that's just how it is. But then you'll get some of those users that have really great stories. Then you want to ask why. Even when you think you know the answer, ask people why they do or say things. The answers will often surprise you, and a conversation started from one question should go on as long as it needs to. You want to look for inconsistencies. Sometimes what people say and what they do are different, and those inconsistencies often hide interesting insights. You want to pay attention to nonverbal cues. You want to be aware of body language and emotions. And again, you don't want to be afraid of silence. You can often feel the need to ask another question when there is a pause, but if you allow for silence, again, it gives that person time to reflect on what they've said. It might reveal something deeper. You don't want to suggest answers to your questions. Even if they pause before answering, don't help them by suggesting an answer. This can unintentionally get people to say things that agree with your expectations. And then you want to ask questions neutrally. So, what do you think about buying gifts for your spouse? Again, is a better question than, don't you think shopping is great? The first question doesn't imply that there's a right answer. It's open-ended. So, what are the roles of actually running an interview? You have a lead interviewer. They lead the conversation, they maintain the connection, they dig into comments, and they ask questions. You have a scribe and a backup interviewer. The scribe focuses on taking in-depth notes and direct quotes from the interviewee, and then can also chime in with insightful questions based on patterns or notes that they're taking. And then you could have a recording device or a video device. Mostly, it just records. If you have Siri, you might get some snarky remarks. This is great to go back and corroborate thoughts and language from the user. Body language can also be great cues to have as well. So it's really important to have these roles. If you're only one person, then you're going to be taking the lead interview role, and you absolutely want to have some type of recording device, assuming that the person you're interviewing is okay with that. Because the lead interview role is really important to maintain that conversation, that connection, to dig into comments. So when I've held this role in interviews, I have the list of questions, and I'm not thinking about the next question. I'm only thinking about how to engage this person on the answer. Only thinking about how to take that deeper and discover more insight, while the person I'm working with is actually taking important notes, is writing down those quotes. And then hopefully, in my case, I almost always use some type of video device. We can also go back, and anywhere where we haven't rephrased, we can go back and watch those videos and see what that person actually said. Like, hey, we took this note down. Is that true though? Yes, this is exactly what they said. Or no, we were definitely like paraphrasing and kind of putting our own spin on it. And so it's really important to have that scribe and the recording device if you can. So the arc that we want to experience when running an interview: intro yourself, intro the product or the project, and then start building that rapport. Asking questions about whatever you're talking about, the industry, get in their mind, thinking about it. I think we all kind of understand how that works. And then within those interview questions that you've come up with, you want to evoke stories. And then hopefully at that peak, you're exploring the emotions within those stories. As you wrap up, get into some questions, statements about where you're going with this project or product, what's happening with the information that you're gathering, if there will be a follow-up, if you could potentially interview them again, maybe based on even a new prototype, and things like that. And then, of course, thank you and a wrap-up. So running the interview is, again, building a little bit of rapport, using the interview guide and making sure to ask if they're okay with any recording, and then explaining the roles of everyone involved. You want to follow up on questions and dig into meaning. You don't want to offer your own insight or stories or put words in their mouth. You're here to facilitate, and it's important to leave space for their thoughts to fully develop. It's also okay to change up the question a bit if they're really struggling. If you're on question 4, you ask them the question and it's been a minute and they're just really not sure, that's where you can take maybe a little bit of liberty following the guidelines of question asking to maybe rephrase or ask it in a little bit different way to see if you can get some value out of that. And then if they really can't come up with an answer, it's okay to just move on. Don't make them feel bad about it. Like, that's fine. Let's just jump to the next question. The timing of running an interview should be between 20 and 60 minutes. Other things to keep in mind is asking users to elaborate on responses that you think you understand. Also, finding extreme users is a good thing that'll get you to that true emotional issue. And then also following unexpected threads, going down the rabbit hole. And then, like I mentioned before, embracing awkward silence. A couple of questions that have come up is, can a person in design thinking role move around into different industries, or should they always stay in one area? That would be a great question for the blog. High level, I would say they can definitely move around into different industries. Design thinking applies to all sorts of different roles, jobs, and industries. But we can explore that a little bit more in the blog for sure. Another question that came through, is there a good time to interview a small group instead of an individual, or bringing the individual interviewees back for a group interview? We can explore this more on the blog. The short answer is that typically you want to do one-on-one so you don't end up with groupthink. So you don't get one person in a group of 4 who says something, or even 2 to 3 who say the same thing, and then that 4th person feels like they kind of have to go along with that answer to fit in. Oftentimes in a group interview, people don't feel as comfortable sharing real insights or how they actually feel, and it can be a lot tougher to get into stories. But there are a few use cases of interviewing in a group or in a panel of sorts. So we can explore that more in the blog for sure. So what does interviewing look like in practice? What if we, right now, start brainstorming some questions? So coming up with questions for an interview. Let's say we want to attract a new customer segment for a bank. Naturally, because it's 2020 and everyone is focused on Gen Z, let's say we run a bank and we want to attract Gen Z customers. What type of questions would we ask them? Let's consider several different areas. Things like features that a bank would have, communications that a bank would have between users and the bank, security, and then also social impact. So how do we actually write these questions? Just a quick reminder, we want to write open-ended questions, not just yes or no. We want to have specificity. We want to evoke stories. We want to ask why as much as possible. And we want to remain neutral. So if we keep those things in mind, feel free to jump in the chat now or raise your hand and put it in the Q&A and come up with ideas that we can add to this list of questions for a bank to attract Gen Z audience. And there's a few that I came up with. So I might start with something as generic and open just to get the conversation going, like what is your experience like with your current bank? Could also do another one that's really generic, like what features are meaningful to you with your bank? Great answer, great question. Tell me about the last time that you got a mortgage. That's a really specific feature. Another question, what features would you want your bank to have, or what are must-have features for your bank? I like that. That gets into more specificity of like, okay, not just what features, but what are those must-haves? What tools do you use most at your current bank? I like that. Again, it's specific. When was the last time you got frustrated with your bank? Great question. That starts to get into some of that emotional stories. Tell me what investments you like to make. I like it. It's not just yes or no, and it's going to get you some insight on what type of investments they're making. More specific. What would you prefer between these three? Going to a bank, using a website, or a mobile app? A couple other questions rolling in here. These are really good. What activities do you use the most in online banking? What was the best experience you got with your advisor? I like that as well. couple of other questions here. What do you like about your bank? Again, nice, open, early question, way to get them talking about their bank, a way to get them thinking about it. How many times a month do you interact with your bank? Could be a really important question as well. Discovering that maybe someone only interacts with their bank once a month. That's going to really change how you develop features for that person. What is your ideal banking experience? I like that. That explores stories, that gets someone to share. Hopefully, well, this one specific time, this is what happened, and it worked out really well. Or I use my bank in this way, and when they do these things, it works out perfect. And then you might even go into things that aren't their ideal banking experience. Or you might be able to follow up with, oh, that's great. Why do you feel about that? Get more insight into it, and then ask them the converse of that question. So what would be a not ideal banking experience? More specific questions. Tell me about the last time you used an ATM or online banking. I like it. Why don't you quit your bank? That's a good question. I've definitely quit a couple of banks, so I have some strong answers about that. But it would be interesting to find out from users what makes them stay. What is the switching cost there? Especially if they are unhappy. Why haven't they switched yet? And that's a question that you can really start to dig deep into and hopefully develop some emotional connection. Why do you even need a bank? Great question. Is the social impact of your bank important to you? That could be a little yes or no. So we could even dig down a little bit deeper into that. Same with, does your bank support the environment community? And just switching that up in, is it important that your bank has a social impact? Or is it important that your bank gives back to the community? Or what ways would you want to see a bank treat the environment better? And maybe it could be as quick of an answer as like, I like to see that they're promoting online banking and they are defaulting to digital and email statements over paper mail, and that's an opt-in choice. What would a new bank have to offer to make you switch from your current one? Get some really good insights there. How do you foresee new technologies transforming your banking experience in the future? Also really interesting and can provide some good insight into maybe technologies that that generation is using right now that they would like to see integrated in their bank. That could come up after the interview session as you start defining things and ideating. Maybe that transforms into insight of, okay, well, a large portion of this generation uses video type of social media and tools like Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram, and they want that style of experience with their banker. Obviously, there's a lot of rules around that, so you can't just like put your bank on Instagram or Snapchat, but maybe that's a feature that you could explore in taking back even a low fidelity prototype of, well, yeah, maybe Gen Z is looking for a bank where they can have quick video conversations with a banker. And that's something that you could develop in an app, in the banking app, that would also have the security levels that banks need. I like this one. It's specific and it's story based, telling me about the worst experience with a bank customer service department. So not even just with a bank, that's really generalized, still helpful, but specifically within a bank customer service department. So that's probably going to get into like the communication side of things. And if you've been working with a bank, I feel like we've all had one or two, maybe less than desirable interactions with customer service. Mm. Also a really interesting question. Imagine the best impact that a bank could have on our world. So you might be able to get your interviewee to really explore ideas on ways that bank could have an impact. Also a really interesting question. Um, why would you want or actually go into a physical location rather than using the website? And I think that there has been some banks that have explored that question deeply, like Ally, I know, for instance, has no physical offices. And so they have kind of hit some type of need there. Obviously, they're doing pretty well. How long do you have to wait to speak with a customer service agent? I like that. It's specific, ties right into the communication level. And then you might be able to evoke a little bit of emotion there, like, oh yeah, typically it's a chat box on my app and they get right back to me, no big deal. Or it could be a different bank that doesn't have as good of an online experience, and so you have to call in, and maybe for whatever reason, there's always a 10-minute wait. And that can be really frustrating if you just want to ask a quick question you're unsure of, you're spending 10 minutes on the phone with a customer service agent. Could get a really good answer out of that, could discover some really interesting insights out of that. Awesome. Those were all really incredible questions. I think you have a grasp of kind of what we're looking for here. So, benefits from taking the full design thinking course. You're going to understand the design thinking process. You're going to identify and assess opportunities through customer needs analysis. You're going to create clear product specifications based on customer needs that are a mix of the three important factors of desirability, focusing on humans wanting your product, feasibility, focus on building the right technology, and also viability, which is making sure that there is a positive business outcome in your solution. Design thinking will help you generate and evaluate new product and service concepts through applied creativity. It'll help you work more collaboratively and get leadership buy-in. As a quick reminder, we are offering design thinking classes coming up early February in Toronto, late February virtually, and then we'll be doing a real Agile class early February as well. And again, we'll get some clarity on those dates. And we're running this sale price of 25% off, so it's just $9.99 per person.
So Caleb, I got a few questions on the side here that I would like to ask.
Yeah.
So one of the questions was, is A/B testing part of design thinking, or is that part of one of the other processes you discussed?
A/B testing specifically is a little bit of a different process, but in essence, that's where the non-linear process of design thinking, you could really call it all A/B testing. As you go through the interview and then you start defining the problem and then you go back to the interviews with this defined problem, you're really kind of A/B testing your definition. And then as you keep moving through, you start developing a prototype, and you go back to defining, you go back to interviewing even with that prototype, you're really A/B testing those prototypes. It's maybe not quite as direct as you would in marketing, where you have two very separate websites up and you're figuring out which one has more hits or clicks or conversions. But in essence, you are kind of doing A/B testing throughout the entire process.
Okay, great. Another question was, are there other ways to interview customers if you don't have direct access to them?
Yeah, I've run these in a handful of different ways. Direct access, face-to-face is great. If you can't do that, then you could do surveys. I often use Google Forms. It's pretty simple and straightforward. You might not get quite as in-depth answers there, but you can still gain some value. And as long as you have the ability to go back and follow up on questions and add clarity, it could be a good route to go. It could even be a good place to start before you do in-person interviews. And then, of course, you could do, Zoom or Skype or video interviews. On the lowest level, I would say you could even utilize social media and just start doing some polls. That could be, easy, low barrier, step one. Maybe your bank, if we're talking about the same example, a bank could put a poll out there for how many people are following us, which generation are you from? And if you're from Gen Z, what's the most important thing about banking to you? It's not quite the most scientifically appropriate data, but it could give you some insight to start pushing something forward if you needed to show some validation for following an idea that you have.
Okay, great. And then the last question that I have, unless people, of course, would like to submit some additional questions, are during the class, can we use real-life examples from our industry to work through problems? I'm assuming that means if you work in banking, can we work through a banking example? If you're working in other types of industries, restaurant, can you use those during the full course?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, we have a lot of activities planned in the 2-day course where we walk through each of these steps and we actually write the questions and we interview people and we come up with prototypes and we test them and hopefully come up with an ultimate solution. But if you have a specific thing that you want to run through the design thinking course from your company, you could do that for just you or you and maybe a partner or someone who's with you, depending on what you want the whole class to know, or if it's all of your company at the class, then we could all work through it together. There's a lot of different ways that we could go about doing that, but in short, yes, we could integrate the real life problem that you have from your company and walk it through the design thinking process over the course of 2 days.
And it looks like we just had another submittee of another great questions. Which role in an organization usually leads design thinking activities, and what skill is required? Skill set.
Yeah, great question. And I think that's one that we'll add to the blog and really expound on. But essentially, anyone can lead the design thinking activities. I think the skill set would be taking a course like ours and making sure you understand all of the phases and how to run through them, and then you can teach the rest of your organization, or if you have that whole group go through the design thinking class, then it's not necessarily having a single direct leader. It could be the entire group kind of pushing it forward and understanding everyone's role in that.
Do you think having facilitation skills would be helpful?
Yes,
in
absolutely.
Conducting? Which part of the organizations do you usually see driving these efforts? Just out of curiosity, is it marketing that you see? Is it product development? Is it technology? Is there any one area that you see generally spearheads this, or is it all over the organization?
Yeah, with my experience, there might be some data on if there are specific areas of organizations that are really running these or driving these. If I had to make an assumption, I would say it's probably more on the marketing and product development sides of things. But where I've run them, it has been through all stages of the company or all areas of the company. And that's why you're really looking for that multidisciplinary team as well. So it's not necessarily like, okay, well, yeah, marketing is running this thing. It's here's 10 people from all these different areas of the company that are running this thing. It's truly integrated throughout the company.
Great. Another great question from Danny. Should the lead and backup interview rehearse before facilitating the actual interview?
Yes, definitely. And you could even do that either with yourselves, or you could do it just with a friend or someone else at your company. Like, hey, we're going to run these interviews. We just want to make sure we have a little bit of a flow down. Even though you're not our target user, you mind if we practice with you? And that can help get out some of those first and second interview kind of kinks in your system to make sure it flows a little bit smoother. And you'll still kind of come in contact with those, whether you're on your first one or you're on your 10th one, but practicing would definitely make all of the interviews after that go a little bit smoother.
Great. Any final questions? All right, we're done a little bit early, which is great. We can go back to work, right? I just talked to the people at WebAge, the web staff people. Again, I just reposted the presentation slides at the bottom of the chat in an evaluation form, if you'd like to fill that out. Also, due to high demand of this particular webinar, they are going to be posting the video on the website within the next week or so. So you can look for that. Also, the questions to our blog should take also about a week to plug up, and we will place those on the blog also at webagesolutions.com. One final question. Great. What are your favorite tools to generate ideas?
Good question. There's a handful of tools out there like mind mapping there's a couple other, I can't think of them off the top of my head. In general, what I typically do is just follow the ideation process and get in a group and we brainstorm ideas and we just start writing things down. The full course, we definitely go into a little bit more on how to brainstorm and what are some of the best ways to go about doing that. And so there's not necessarily a lot of specific tools, as much as it is more of a process to follow of fully open ideas, no bad ideas, exploring unique concepts or adding interesting constraints to come up with more ideas.
Someone just said they often use sticky notes, which
Yeah.
I agree with. Sometimes low fidelity is the best.
Absolutely. Sticky notes are great, whether they're the small 3x3s or even the really big kind of poster board size. There's a handful of ways to put those around the room with various questions on top, and then you could even add more ideas with smaller ones, or you can use it as a voting system. I've seen and used them in a handful of ways.
And for those of you that are Scrum Masters, a lot of the stuff that you have learned to be a Scrum Master on doing facilitation, like dot voting and infinity estimating and all of those facilitation techniques work really great with design thinking. So those skills definitely transfer over sometimes when, trying to learn how to do these skills as well. All right, any further questions? All right, any final thoughts, Caleb? Oh, we do have one final question. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Danny. He says, great session.
Thank you very much.
Well, with that being said, Caleb, I appreciate all your time today, and we hope to hear from you all soon. If you have any questions, we have the email address to contact here. If you'd like to contact either of us directly, she can put you in contact with us also. So thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your day. Oh, see this question, Caleb? Any tips for training engineers with emotional approach? That's a great one for that's a whole blog in itself.
Yeah, great one for the blog.
Yeah, I'm assuming the question has to do with training people that are emotional about their jobs, take things personally. Is that what the question you're asking? Just make sure I understand correctly. Here, I can even turn you on so we can chat. Let's see if I can find your name. Oh, emotional equals design thinking. I see what you're saying. I'm sorry, I took that differently. Oh, engineers. Yeah, we definitely would cover that in the course on how to deal with all different kinds of mindsets and skill sets and approaches. Because an engineer, takes a different approach to the way they approach the world, more analytical sometimes. So yes, we would have some tips, but look for our blog and we will post. I should probably write a whole blog on that particular one.
Mm-hmm.